It is extremely difficult to tell the story of the indigenous people of North America. That's because it is not one story, not one people. Even when you limit it to the American West, you're talking about hundreds of distinct people with distinct cultures. They came to the landmass we now call North America a long time ago. The readings provide examples of some Native American groups and their initial contacts with Europeans. About 20,000 years ago, the planet warmed and the glaciers receded enough to reveal a land bridge between Asia and North America. The ancestors of Native Americans came across that bridge. This has been confirmed by studies using meteorology, geology, paleontology, and most recently, genetics. In a comprehensive study of genetic diversity in Native Americans completed in 2012, a team of geneticists collected data from 52 Native American groups and 17 Siberian groups, studying more than 300,000 DNA sequence variations to examine patterns of genetic similarities and differences between the population groups. Among other things, they determined that most Native American groups descend from the first migration. Later migrations made important genetic contributions. The team also found that once in the Americas, people expanded southward along a route that hugged the west coast, with groups splitting off along the way. By 12,000 to 14,000 years ago, the Clovis culture had developed, which made fluted spear points and hunted mammoth and bison. By about 11,000 years ago, we see signs of the Folsom culture, which made elaborate Folsom spear points, hunted bison and other large animals, and traveled to find game. Afterwards, they developed techniques for forcing herds of bison into box canyons and off cliffs. They developed bows and arrows and other tools. Europeans were developing along similar paths. Some were still living in caves, others created reed huts. Tool development varied by location. By 9,000 years ago, which would be 7,000 BCE, people in North America were making baskets and building shelters. The later periods of the ancestral Pueblans coincided with the Plains Woodland period further east and the Mississippian cultures. During the Mississippian period, extensive mound complexes were built in North America. Most prominent were the Cahokia Mounds in Illinois. It was the largest settlement north of Mexico, including 120 mounds. At its peak between 1100 to 1200 BCE, city covered nearly 6 square miles and may have had as many as 100,000 people. Houses were arranged in rows around open plazas. Agricultural fields and a number of small villages surrounded and supplied the city. The Cahokians worked copper and made complex art and tools. They were known to trade with other tribes as far away as Minnesota. Other complex trade networks existed at that time. The larger mound cities were abandoned about the same time as Mesa Verde and other sites of ancestral Pueblans. That coincides with the global climate change called the Little Ice Age. Scientists theorize that drought and the reduction of maize production, together with possible deforestation and overhunting by the concentrated populations, forced them to move away from major sites. However, a number of smaller villages still existed at the time of Hernando de Soto's expedition from 1539 to 1543. He visited many villages, in some cases staying a month or longer. Some encounters were violent, while others were relatively peaceful. European contact dramatically changed these native societies. Natives lacked immunity to infectious diseases such as measles and smallpox carried by the Europeans. Epidemics caused the death of the elders and undermined the social order of many villages. Political structures collapsed. Some groups adopted European horses and became nomadic. Some groups, such as the Cherokee, maintained an oral tradition linking to their mound-building ancestors. Other Native American groups, who migrated hundreds of miles away and lost their elders to disease, did not know their ancestors had built the mounds dotting the landscape. In this old map, you can see the distribution of Native Americans related by language groups. The second map is the same with higher contrast. Note the intensive mixture on the west coast. California had a lot of small tribes before European contact. Many were lost after contact with the Europeans. The East Coast, too, had a number of small tribes that did not survive contact. Those that did began shifting westward away from the European settlements, voluntarily or involuntarily. Often they came into conflict with tribes that were already settled in those western regions. By the mid-1700s, the French, English, and Spanish, as well as the Russians in the white area in the upper northwest, were laying claim to great swaths of the continent, which is still mostly inhabited by Native Americans. Conflicts between European Americans and Native Americans were increasing. The French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763 saw different native tribes and confederacies align with the British or the French. After the hostilities, British General Geoffrey Amherst oversaw the transition of French forts to British control in the Western lands. Western lands meaning those near the Great Lakes. He introduced policies which disturbed large numbers of Indians and contributed to Pontiac's rebellion in 1763. Pontiac organized a rebellion of a large number of tribes and confederacies against British rule. 8 forts were destroyed and hundreds of colonists were killed or captured, with many fleeing the region. Subsequently, George III issued the Proclamation of 1763, which reserved the lands west of the Proclamation line for the Native Americans and prohibited purchase or settlement in those lands. The Proclamation line was set at the fall line of the Appalachian Mountains, or at the point where the rivers flowed westward rather than eastward, like the Continental Divide in the Rocky Mountains. This established the first American West, west of the Appalachians. The proclamation also reserved any negotiations with Indians to the sovereign, which would be passed on to our Constitution decades later.